Hello and welcome to Sports Opinion, the weekly sports talk show on Channel 18. My name is Dirk Keller, and we are joined today by a very special guest. Before we get to him, though, I want to reintroduce some missing members of our panel. Bob Boyd is back after a couple weeks
Good to be
vacation.
back, yeah. Thank you.
Over here on the far left is Bud Supple. Bud, welcome back.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Glad to be back.
We were just saying, I don't think we've seen you since Christmas time,
No.
have we? We didn't see you at Valentine's time. And
No.
it's
Working
good to have
all
you
the
back.
time when I come back.
It's good to have you back. Earl Murphy's here. He's always here,
Earl
just
the
like
Pearl.
me. So, and then, of course, very special guest, Dr. Tom Davis, just the winningest coach in Iowa basketball history. That's all.
Is that true?
Yep.
Very true.
I think they're making that up.
Certainly is. Certainly is.
Hey, Joe, which camera should I be looking at? That's right here. Okay. It's hard to tell sometimes. Anyway, Dr. Tom, welcome to Sports Opinion.
Oh, thank you.
It's really great to have you here.
Yeah,
It's
appreciate
just a
it.
treat. Today I want to talk a little bit about how you got started in basketball. And I did a little research and looked you up and found out, well, of course, we knew that Dr. Tom grew up in Ridgeway, Wisconsin. We've all been through there on our trips to Madison.
You never stopped, though. Huh?
Afraid to.
Yeah, that's a, you got a point
Well, they do
there.
have a few bars there. They still have a couple.
Yeah, they got a lot of Badger fans there,
Oh,
too.
yeah.
But I suspect there are probably a few Hawkeye fans in Ridgeway, thanks to you. Now, in Ridgeway, you played point guard on the basketball team.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you went to...
Was he a captain? You know, I don't even remember, Murph, but it was a small town, 400 people in the town, 60 kids in high school.
Oh my gosh.
So you were a player. If you wanted to go out, you were automatically on the team. So
Did you play other sports there?
Good memories. Well, we only had two sports, as would be
Baseball?
common, baseball and basketball.
Yeah.
And they were year-round. We'd play basketball year-round and then baseball when the weather was good enough.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
good memories. I think growing up in a small town, there's a lot of us from the Midwest. You know, there's a lot of heritage from small towns, whether it's in Iowa or, you know, in Wisconsin. It's a different way of life, and people around a city have a little trouble understanding what small town life is like.
Yeah.
But I have good memories of Ridgeway High School.
And it's a pretty area up there. I can still remember the first time I went to a Hawkeye game in Madison. And it's been 30-plus years, but I just couldn't believe how gorgeous the landscape is. It always seemed to me that people were very friendly until they found out you were a Hawkeye fan.
That's right.
But that's all right. That's
Yeah, there's
all right.
pretty strong feelings, and I think it's a good point. That area through there, a lot of people that settled in that area. There was a lot of mining in that area, so there's a strong Welsh settlement, and of course a lot of small farms and things. Almost everything having to do with farming, other than the mining. Mineral Point, Wisconsin, has
Been there?
was a huge mining, lead mining, coal, whatever they could get out of the ground.
It's a beautiful little town now. I don't know if you've been through there lately. But,
Sure.
It's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Was dairy farming big around that area
Yeah.
also, like
It was-
other parts of Wisconsin?
Yeah, it was almost all related to farming. You know,
Yeah.
my parents were both country school teachers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And they had both gone to Platteville to college. My dad went 1 year, and my mom did the regular 4-year tour. And so they taught in country schools, which are really common
Sure.
around
Yeah.
small towns like that.
Well,
Did
they
they-
were in Iowa back in that
Sure.
day, too. The one-room schoolhouse town kind of thing? Or was
Yep,
it?
exactly. That was about it. And
Yeah.
you might have anywhere from 8 or 9 to 12 or 14 kids in school. So I visited a few times when I was a little guy.
Did your parents grow up there in the Ridgeway area?
My mother was from Barneveld, which is, she grew up on a farm outside of Barneveld. My dad grew up right in the town of Ridgeway. And,
I'll be darned.
they moved in their later years to New Glarus, Wisconsin.
Oh,
They
yeah.
both got jobs teaching in the city. of New Glarus. It's maybe about 1,200 people, and so they were able to teach right there in the grade school.
Big German community, right?
Swiss.
Swiss.
And I'm sure
Okay.
German too, but primarily a Swiss village that known for its Willem Tell festival. I don't know if any of you ever gone, but over Labor Day weekend they put on a outdoor festival.
I had an aunt who went there for that.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, and of course a lot of these little Swiss. There's a lace factory there in town, and they got a brewery, and a lot of little restaurants that, with the fondues and other typical Swiss type of foods.
Wholesome upbringing. Really.
Small town Midwest.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Now, you, like your parents, you went to college at Platteville and played basketball. Who was your coach there?
Well, his name was John Barth.
John Barth.
And I think one of the things that influenced me a lot, I didn't realize it so much, but that he was such a good coach. He was really, really good. He was a football coach by training, and he took the Platteville job because they guaranteed him he'd become the head football coach. But you've also got a coach, and it turned out he was a better basketball coach. So. But he was great fundamentally, and I think that helped not only me, but literally our whole team. Platteville was a teacher's college originally, Platteville State Teachers College, and now the University of Wisconsin at Platteville. But most of us were going into teaching, different majors that we would teach, but we were going to become teachers. And of course, in many cases, those of us, I played baseball as well as basketball there, and so coaching just, got in your blood, and that's what you were going to do.
What was your position in baseball?
Well, I played at the college level there. I played second base because we had a very good shortstop, but I grew up as a shortstop, and then I played in my later years. After college, I played some semi-pro baseball in Madison.
I didn't know that.
Monona Grove, yeah. And, so I played shortstop then until I got to be too old, 24, 25, somewhere in there.
Was that the 3 League?
Did you play run and shoot basketball?
Yeah, we did, Murph. I think my senior year in high school, my coach had played for John Barth at Platteville, and so he believed in pressure defense and fast break. And in fact, we had the record at that time. I think we played 17 games. I'm not sure the numbers, but we went over 100 points 7 times.
Wow.
In 17 games, and for a 32-minute high school game, that was a lot of points.
That's incredible.
No
Yeah.
3-pointers either.
No 3-pointers in those days. They had the peach baskets, and you had to go up and get the ball out of the basket.
Yeah.
So when did you cut the hole in the bottom of the basket?
Say you haven't played that, like, you used to play at Iowa, if the guy was pressuring the guy out of bounds, you go on the full court, and he got hit in the face with it.
No, that Bob Knight invented that.
Yeah.
I'll never forget
I believe it.
I know Brad Lohaus won't forget it. Kent Hill won't forget it.
I think Chris Street, you have him up there? Chris Street?
Chris Street, yep.
And one other player.
Well,
Did Jess?
Jess Settles was excellent.
Yeah,
up there,
Jess Settles.
Yeah.
And he's coaching now.
I know,
Down at Iowa
yeah.
Wesleyan, and he came to see me, and his wife is coaching.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
She's the high school coach.
And
I'll be
it's not
darned.
Pleasant?
Yes, the women's coach, and they came up and Jess said, Joanna, wonderful girl, and he says, Joanna wants to learn how to use the full court pressure. And so I said, well, Jess, I said, you played that. What were you in college, 7, 8, 9 years or something like that? And he said, Coach, he says, I know my own position, but I can't remember what those other guys were doing. And so that's sort of what you do as a player. A lot of times you don't know what the other guys are doing, and so it's only certain types of players that I think can go and translate that into coaching. And a lot of times point guards do, because you're used to kind of doing what the coach wants.
Being a floor general.
Coach on the floor.
Yeah. That's sort of the way the little guy, that's the only way you can get in the game sometimes, is being in charge. So.
Speaking of Jess Settles, I ran into him in St. Louis after Game 6 of the World Series.
Is that right?
I was with Mike Naughton, the former ticket manager here. He's a good friend of mine and softball teammate with Brad. And we were down there for Game 6 and 7, but I saw Jess outside the stadium afterwards, and like everybody else, he's never been happier, I think, in his life, or at least not for a long time. That was a big deal.
He had a bad back, didn't he?
He still does, Murph. He's had you know, quite a few.
He was saying how happy he was. I thought
Yeah.
maybe he got cured.
No, he's pretty active. He can play golf, but he has trouble getting down, like getting a tee into the ground or getting the ball to the cup is still a challenge for him. But he's game, and he's a terrific athlete. You could just see with his action that he could do about anything he wanted to do as long as his body let him.
Pretty good golfer too.
I think he could be.
Yeah.
You could just see and he was a pretty disciplined guy, Jess. And to play golf well, the discipline's important. That you need to be able to. It isn't just being a good athlete. You have to have a head for it too, and Jess has that.
What kind of year did he have?
Well, you know, he took over. It's funny. He was an assistant coach down in Burlington at the junior college.
Okay.
Under Terry Carroll, and this opportunity came up. He'd been there 2 years, I think, working with Terry, and this opportunity came up, and so it was like mid-year. They had some kind of a problem and a coaching change, and so he just finished part of the year. I haven't talked to him lately, but at last I heard he has been named the coach for this coming year as well.
Okay,
So that
that's
he
a good
will.
sign.
But I don't know if maybe there's some change there.
Yeah.
Well, the high school they won the state championship, didn't
The
they?
boys did.
Boys,
Yeah.
yeah.
They were good, yeah.
And the head coach of Mount Pleasant was the son of the assistant at West High, who we had on our show while you were
Okay.
gone. So the father had to watch the son in the title game go into double overtime,
Yeah.
and then still be prepared for his title game right afterwards. It was tough, as he mentioned. But
Fantastic.
They both came out okay though for them, didn't they?
Yeah.
They won them
Yeah,
both.
they won them both. And speaking of father-son combos, Keno's got a new job.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, he was out of coaching this year and working for the Big Ten Network.
Which
so he was
did
doing
a great job on the Big Ten.
Well, I appreciate that.
I mean
It's hard for a father to be, neutral. You get your biased stuff, obviously. And I think you're good. I said, I think this could be a career if you want to go with it, and so see what you can do. And he seemed to be. It's hard being a television guy. They put a mic in your ear. You're going to put a thing in your ear, and so in your ear, you're listening to the producer tell you things.
Oh, okay.
And you're watching the game,
Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
and you got a partner who sometimes is telling you something, and you're trying to think about what you want to say. It's not an easy
hard.
challenge, yeah. And,
It's a hard transition.
he just seemed to. He said, "Yeah, it's okay. It's not that bad." So.
I thought he was a natural.
Yeah.
And we talked about it on the show. I was surprised at first that he went back into coaching so quickly when he had such a good job and did such a good job with the Big Ten Network. But somebody on the show, it might have been Steve Berkman, said, I think the coaching job pays a little better.
Well,
Plus, don't you think it gets in your blood too, Tom?
yeah,
I mean,
I think it's both of the. I don't think the pay in Keno's case was a real factor, but I think he just felt the coaching thing, and so but he knew he didn't have to rush into something, that if it weren't
Yeah.
the right job. And when this job came up at Central Michigan, I think he felt it was a lot like the Drake job when we went over and took that Drake job, and I got back into coaching partially because of him wanting to do it. And I think he felt he could see the similarities, and that job was a lot of fun for both of us, the Drake, getting Drake
I
going
bet.
again. And I think he saw it's a real rebuilding job at Central Michigan. He's got a lot of open scholarships. And
Are the Chippewas?
yeah,
And what community is that?
well, it's Mount Pleasant.
Okay.
Mount
They call it Central Michigan, but it's a little bit north.
More of a Yooper.
Yeah, north of Lansing and up parallel to Saginaw. I've not traveled much up in that area.
And you can always get back in the Big Ten network or some network.
I think maybe so. I
Yeah.
think that is one thing. If you stay out of coaching too long, it might be hard to get back in, and perhaps. But I don't know that he's thinking that far ahead. You think you're going to get
Yeah.
it done, and it's going to see what you can do.
Yeah.
So.
Well, ironically, we were talking about father-son coaching combos. We mentioned the Runquist from Mount Pleasant and West High. You, in 1987, won the Associated Press Coach of the Year Award. 21 years later, Keno wins it
Yeah.
after his 1 year at Drake. with 30 wins that season.
Is that right?
I don't know that there are too many father-son combos that have ever won the national
I
basketball.
can't think of any. I mean, I thought about that this week as well, and that'd be a good internet thing to pursue.
I should have looked it up. I was, well, 4 kids at home.
But that's pretty unique, Tom.
Yeah, it was a magic year for him. Usually your first year as a head coach, you're doing so many things for the first time, and you have some bumps in the road, where you just don't. But he had the touch with that team. He just had a way of putting them all together and turning them into a heck of a ball club.
It was magical, and
it really was.
You and Keno had the whole state pulling for you.
Well, we lost some good players my last year there. I knew, like, in February that I was going to retire, and I told Keno one night after a game, you get so emotionally wiped out, and it takes a lot out of you.
Sure.
I said to him, because I was close to 70 by then, because I think I was 65 when we took that job at Drake, and I said to him in the locker room, I'm changing afterwards and all sweaty and everything, and I said, get yourself ready. I said, because I think he had a contract where he was going to be named the head coach when I retired, and I said, you get ready, because I think this is going to be it unless something happens. I said, I think I've had enough. And
it's one thing to sweat on the job. It's another thing to be wearing a suit and sweating on the job. It's no fun.
And when I sweat a lot anyway, so it was not.
Did that take Keno by surprise, or did he think you might be around another year or two?
I don't know. We had talked about it a little bit, because when you travel, all of a sudden you're traveling with your son. You're going a lot at Drake, in the Missouri Valley. A lot of your trips are bus trips.
Yeah.
And you're in the hotel and you're going to practice. So I spent more time with him than I did. Maybe going back to when he's in 5th grade or something.
Yeah.
We traveled a lot together as a family, and so we'd gotten to know each other really well, and I think he could probably kind of see it's coming.
Did you help him watch that next year?
I don't think so. I tried not to go to anything.
Okay.
I tried not to go to the press conference, or I would stick my head in the door at practices occasionally, because I stayed on and worked for a year at Drake as an assistant to the athletic director. And we did a little fundraising, and we had raised David Blank, who was the previous athletic director, and then Sandy Clubb, who took the job as the AD there now. And she had a great idea. There are a lot of people that donated money to try to get us to upgrade that program. And so she and I went around and said thanks to all those people. And you'd have been shocked at the look on their face, because they're waiting for the ask. Okay, now we need more money, Murph. More than almost every one of them would say, "Well, what do you need? What do you need?" And we'd say, "No, we just came in to tell you what we had done with your money that you'd already given us, and tell you what we see as the future and where we've got to go." And that was it. There was no...
Really classic.
It was just to go in and say thanks. So that was pretty much my job for a year.
Okay, well, that's
and
good.
as a result...
how many times does that happen? Did you go back and
I don't know. I'd never been part of it before, and I'd worked at quite a few different schools. But
So did contributions go up after that?
I don't know. Keno took the Providence job right after that, and so I resigned and left, and I'm not sure what the details of it were. But I was going to tell a quick story. We had a golf outing to make money for the program, because at Drake they were not funded very well. And at the golf outing, I spoke and said a few words, and then I was going to introduce Keno, and I talked about the team coming back. I said, and you got Clayton Korver coming back, who's one of the great kids, could really shoot the ball, and you got Bucky Cox, who was one of the best big men in the league, and Brent Heemskirk, and I went down the roster and how many guys we had back and built them up a little bit, and Keno got up, he said, he said, all the years I've heard my dad talk, and whenever he talked about the next team for the next year, it was, we lost this and we lost that, and we had this. He says, now I'm the coach, and he's telling everybody how good we are. And when he said it, I said, I did do that. I didn't mean to do it, but
but hindsight,
he made it.
You were right.
He made it happen. He had he had the right touch, and he showed some good innovation. He did some new things that we hadn't done previously, and made some real good decisions on. A lot of it's personnel. Who do you decide to play? where do you play them, what plays do you go to, things like that. And he made a lot of those decisions that he'd obviously been thinking about.
Now, do we know any of his assistant coaches on the staff at Central Michigan?
Well, he hasn't announced them yet. I know he's got 2 hired, or 2 have verbally been asked, and I think they've accepted. But what happens, they have to go through a process to be announced. They have to go, the college has to approve them, and they go before a committee, things like that. So I think one of the names for sure will be familiar, but as of right now, it's nothing is official.
Well, I want to go back to your days at Platteville for a little bit. I think you studied poli-sci, is that right?
You know, I was going to be a math major but you come out of a real little high school. I thought I was pretty good at math. And I got in college and I said, man, this is work. I think I'm going to be a history major. So I became a history major and a physical education minor. And then the idea would be to be a high school history teacher or physical education.
But not math.
And not coaching, but definitely. I did my bare minimum of math, and that was it.
So, you know, history majors, I was going to go to bed early last night, and I started watching the Hitler and the War.
Oh, some great television now, isn't there? Some of those go back. And and this was I've seen every bit of Hitler, but they made a big deal out of the Jesse Owens deal and things like that. You know, it was really good. And I didn't get to bed till 1 o'clock. Yeah. Well, see, that's sort of what happened to me in college, Murph, that once I started to study history, and I had a couple of Tom Lundeen is somebody who was from down near where Brad Benson grew up, down near Brad Benson's hometown, the Lundeen family. And he got his doctorate from Iowa, and he was one of my history profs, and he just made history come alive. And so all of a sudden, like you say, I started reading that stuff, and man, I really enjoyed it.
And I'll tell you who was Ralph Miller, the old basketball coach. Bump and I had lunch with him or something. I don't know what it was, and it was. And all he wanted to do was talk about history.
Is that right, Ralph Miller?
Yeah. He
was a real good guy, Murph. I got to know him in my days at Stanford. I got to know him, and he was.
Was he coaching then at Oregon State?
Yes. And of course, he knew I was from the Midwest. I'd actually heard him speak when I was a high school coach in Wisconsin. He came to Madison at the State Coaches Association coaching clinic, and I think he was at Wichita State then, and I heard him speak. He was a terrific speaker.
Is that right?
Clinician to talk basketball. And as a high school coach, that's how you learned, to go to hear guys like Ralph Miller talk about defense and discipline and how you do things. And he was a really good man.
So now you left Platteville after graduation, and you ended up with a head coaching job in Millersville, Illinois.
Milledgeville. Carroll County, which is just across the river from the Quad Cities. Not very far. South of Galena.
South of Galena.
Okay,
about a half hour or so south of Galena.
I just never heard of it. I grew up in Illinois. I never heard of Milledgeville.
Well, it's not. It tells you how big it is. It's not.
I had a feeling. We followed all the high schools. My dad was a basketball coach. We followed all the high school tournaments every year, and I never heard of Milledgeville.
Well, it's an interesting story. I was thinking of going on to grad school. I didn't have any money, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And to go to Wisconsin, go to Madison was where you went naturally to get your master's degree. So I was kind of looking at some junior high teaching jobs up there, and so I'd go right away to grad school. And all of a sudden, the lady called me from the placement office. In those days, when you went through a small college, you had a placement office. And the people in the office, you go in and fill out your resume and everything and get your credentials, your recommendations. And that woman becomes your friend. Or in this case, it was a woman. And so she got to know all the candidates. And the superintendent of schools from Milledgeville, his name was Hanson, that's where he hired all of his elementary school teachers from, was Platteville, because they had a really good reputation for elementary school, grade school teachers. And she said to him, well, do you need anything else? When he'd already hired like 3 or 4 of these teachers from Platteville. And he said, well, I need a basketball coach. She said, I got just the guy for you. And so she says, this guy, Tom Davis, I was only 21 years old.
Yeah.
And in fact, I didn't turn 22 till well into that season. And next thing you know, I'm going down there to interview for that job, and they offered me, so I became the head basketball coach at Milledgeville High School.
So that wasn't very
just
far
like
from
that.
home.
No, it really wasn't. It seemed longer in those days, you know.
I bet.
Yeah.
It was close to Platteville, so it was an easy move.
How long were you at Milledgeville?
1 year.
Just 1 year.
1 year, and I was still playing baseball in Madison for the semi-pro team. The Monona Grove Lakers was the name of their team, and I started work that summer on my master's degree from Wisconsin, and so I knew by going there it accomplished several things, and that's how I ended up at Portage High
Went to
School
Portage.
in Wisconsin for
interrupt you.
5 years.
You're a good friend of Bump Elliott's.
Yep, he's the best.
He's
He's the man.
yeah, I like him very much.
Yeah.
But he's a better. His first love really is baseball. He was a great baseball player.
Yep.
Played center field, and he ended up with a pro team out of the East Coast. And on this team was a pitcher, Robin Roberts.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
geez.
yeah, and
Phillies.
he's on the same team he was. And if you ever get him to talk, he'll make a history out of that.
Yeah.
Well, Bump, you know, was on the Michigan Final Four basketball team,
That's right.
and where his brother Pete was the
Sure.
star. Bump was on the second five, and if you ever get Bump Elliott around, get him to tell a story about being on this team. And the first five on the team ate steak for the pregame meal. The second five ate Salisbury steak.
Mystery meat.
And so,
Is that a true
oh, that is true. You ask Bump next time you see him, and so I'd kid
He
him
won't
all
talk
the time.
about himself. We
Well,
can't get it.
he will. You know, it takes a little coaxing,
Yeah.
but you can get it out of him. And so Bump not only could play baseball, as Murph said, but he was a good basketball player.
Yes.
I mean, to play at the Big
think
Ten
he
level,
held-
Yeah.
to be on the team is pretty solid.
He held Murray Weir to 5 points or something
Yep.
like that.
He had to. His brother got in foul trouble or something, and they put
Yeah.
Bump in
Yeah.
there to guard him.
You know, my dad grew up with Bump and his brother.
Oh, is
in
that right?
Bloomington.
Yeah.
Yep. And we grew up with stories about Bump Elliott, the greatest athlete my
Yep.
father had ever seen. And my dad was no slouch, but Bump was the guy that he held up for us kids to
Yep.
idolize and emulate because he was the all-around good guy.
And you know what? He had small hands. And he returned punts.
Yeah.
He catch the ball. You know, basketball, baseball.
Did you go to his dinner celebrating his time spent at Iowa?
Sure.
That was really something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think they had a picture of him that night in his baseball uniform,
Yeah. That
if I
could be.
remember.
We bought him a car. Remember, we had in those days. Bump never made any money. I mean,
Nope.
in those days, coaches didn't make a lot, but athletic directors made less. And all of a sudden, Bump's retiring, and he's got no car because he had a school
Yeah,
car. And
Yeah.
so we had a golf outing, which I'm sure Murph was part of, and with the proceeds, we bought him a car. And I was going to say, if you knew Bump, did you know Bump's dad, who was a minister there in Bloomington?
Well, his dad was also a doctor
Oh.
and grew up with my grandfather, a doctor at the same hospital. So I didn't know him, but my
He
father
was a
did.
doctor. Well, what I was going
He
to
was
say,
a little bit of everything.
he knew he could give limericks, and so
Oh,
to this day, Bump Elliott can. Now, these are all clean limericks. These aren't like some of you guys have heard some of the other kinds of
There's a lot of
limericks.
Irish in this room right here.
But he can still. I won't say them because I may mess them up. I just.
His dad was a good limerick
I said, where did
storyteller.
you learn? He said, well, it was my dad. He said, my dad could do that.
I'll be
So
darned.
Bump to this
Yes.
day
Yeah.
can tell you. You've heard of
Oh,
him.
yes,
and-
indeed.
Well, he's the guy that brought you here in 1986, and we'll be forever grateful. That's for sure. A lot of people talk about Bump's hiring Hayden Fry and Dan Gable, but to a lot of us are diehard basketball fans. When you came here, everything changed for the better. And when Bump left, I think the Iowa athletic department lost a lot. And it's one of those things you have the benefit of hindsight now, and we can see that. But speaking for all of us, I think we're all pretty grateful that he's still here in town with Barb.
He loves Iowa City.
Yeah, why wouldn't he?
Yeah, he's a rare guy for a coach to work for, in the sense that not only is he a really good guy with very good values, as you know, he just, I mean, he's what you see is what you get. There's nothing devious about Bump. And then to have him not only be a great athlete himself, but then to be a coach at the level that he coached, he understood what you were going through as a coach working for him, and he, you know, he could share with you and understand your day-to-day problems that you're going to have. So he was a terrific guy to work for. The other thing he did that he went through, and you guys may remember this, but he went through that whole era when the men's teams had to start to accept the fact that the women were going to get equal opportunities and equal finances, and the whole Title IX thing started to really have an impact. And so he worked his way through that as well as anybody possibly could.
And
Well,
Christine
that's for
Grant,
sure. He did that.
And
He handled that really well.
Yeah,
He handled it real good. I mean,
Yeah.
he made national
yep.
news on how the way he handled it.
You never knew. I mean, there were so many problems in many institutions, but they weren't here because of the way he
That's right.
he approached
and
things.
Dr. Christine Grant, the longtime women's athletic director, has said many times, if it weren't for Bump Elliott, we don't know where this would have gone here at Iowa.
Yeah, Bump, if you had a problem, and we had our problems, and I'd go into him and say, here's the problem, and he'd listen. He'd say, okay, here's the problem from this end, from the administrative end. Here's what we've got to deal with, and what we've got to. And you'd go out of the office and okay, I understand. There's a solution.
Yeah.
Maybe there's not. Sometimes you have to just live with things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We lived with some tough times during that period, and I think it was one of the reasons Bump retired as early as he did, because some of that was hard on him. There were some hard decisions that had to be made during that period. So,
If Bump were here now, or if he's watching the show, he'd be saying, okay, enough about Bump. Back to Dr. Tom.
Dr. Tom, I'll never forget the trip I made out to California with you and Bump. And I got the job of driving the golf cart.
I remember that. I was afraid.
I never been on a golf course that had so many rocks, big rocks, real big rocks.
Yeah.
I think they carved the golf course out of a rock garden or something.
Yeah.
How many rocks did you hit?
I didn't get a good start. I really had a stroke about a year and a half before that.
I remember that.
And this is my going away party or something. And anyhow, I got it started and churched it and got it going, and I was real bad the first hole. Second hole, pretty good. Third hole, I was all right.
Yeah.
Got her down.
Well, that golf trip, was followed up the old Evashevsky idea of taking the Iowa teams to the west for training in the spring.
Is that right?
And they used to charter a plane and take them. They started in Tucson, and so there'd be the track team and the baseball team and the golf team, and then they would get donors who would want to go along. And then by the time I came here in '86, it was pretty much down. They were doing it now in Palm Springs, and it was pretty much just maybe 10, 12 people, many of whom had started with that group. But two of the guys that would get us on the golf courses, Bill Burton, who was a former great track man at Iowa, and Dick Roeder, who was an Iowa grad, and one of the great athletes. Guys. He was a great tennis player, baseball player, he was on the basketball team.
Is he still alive?
Well, he passed away last fall, Murph, and that's what I was going to mention. They're having a his son is putting on a golf tournament. Kent Roeder in Cedar Rapids is going to put on this golf tournament in honor of Dick for the Alzheimer's Fund. He had Alzheimer's in his later years and then passed away, and they're having this very nice golf outing. If anybody golfs or knew Dick Roeder or would like to get involved, it's the Alzheimer's group out of Cedar Rapids is putting it on in honor of Dick.
He was a great guy.
In fact, Bump and I are going up,
Oh, good.
along with Jimmy Miller and Randy Larson, I think, guys that had all taken part
You
in
better
the,
get the card out.
in the event.
You need a driver?
We could use a driver, Murph.
There you go.
I'll never forget that.
It became and then we just recently stopped going, partially because of Bump. It got harder for him to go, and some of the other guys are getting, as they got older too, in close to their 80s and that, why it just became harder to play some of those courses. So it's no longer a going trip, but we all have good memories of being out there,
Fun.
even Murph driving that cart.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about your early coaching career. You were at Portage for how many years?
5 years.
You left there and went to Maryland.
Yeah, I had built that program. We won 3 games my first year at Portage.
Wow.
And one of them we won by forfeit.
Oh.
So that's how bad we were. The superintendent's son from Wisconsin Dells played too many quarters in the game in the night. And the rule is still like it is today, where you can only play like 6 quarters, and he played the whole freshman game and 2 or 3 quarters in the varsity game, and so I called it on him because we needed that third win.
Meant the difference.
But by then I'd gotten my master's degree from Wisconsin and really enjoyed the graduate work much more than I did even my undergraduate.
What was your master's degree in?
Well, I was in physical education
Okay.
from the University of Wisconsin. Having only a minor, you have to take more hours to get a master's degree in it. But it was pretty easy to do. I was still playing baseball and going to summer school at Madison.
Full time you're at Portage coaching basketball. You're playing baseball in the summer.
Right, and then I became the baseball coach at Portage too, after the guy I was assisting took another job, and so I was both basketball and baseball coach at Portage, and enjoyed it. Baseball in the spring was fun in the sense that you got you out of the classroom and you go down and line the field. I'd put the Cubs game on the radio, and I'd be getting the field ready. You know, in those days as a coach, you did it all. You raked the infield, you put the lines down, put the bases out, and
It was a pretty good life.
it was. You turn that radio up loud in your car and pull your car up next to the field. And
Coach,
listen
did
to-
you ever almost go the baseball route instead of basketball as far as your career, expanding your career?
Well, you know, I would have. I thought I might become a pro player, but I went to quite a few tryouts down in Milwaukee County Stadium. The guys that I played with at Monona Grove, the one year that we went to the national tournament in Wichita, I was the only guy on the team that played that wasn't a professional athlete. That we had Pat Richter played first base and some outfield. Dale Hackbart was on the team. Jim Bakken played third base.
Really? The punter?
Tommy,
Yeah.
the field goal kicker for
Field
the
goal,
Cardinals.
yeah.
So he's a terrific athlete. And our whole pitching staff had pitched minor league baseball. So we had like 6 guys that could all throw. You know, they weren't in major league quality, but they were that next level. So we really had a pretty good.
How'd you do down there?
We won a game.
Did you? Good.
We met our match. As I recall, we went twice that I was playing, and the one time it was double elimination in those days.
Okay.
And the one year we did win one game, but they were a little bit to win. You had to go there. You had to win the state championship of Wisconsin, and Milwaukee Falk was always the big power in the state.
Okay.
If there are any old baseball players that followed it in those days, but it was fun. Baseball's a fun game to play.
It's a great game.
As a result, I wished I could have been better, but it was fun.
Great experience, it sounds like. Well, after...
Were you still at second base?
No, I played shortstop, Murph. Actually, second base would have been because I had an okay arm, but not a powerful arm like really you need to play at that next level professionally. And second base was a lot easier for me, but usually if you're the best infielder, they put you at short because you get more, it's a tougher position to play.
Yes, indeed.
So I happened to be the best that we had, but I'd have been better off to play second. So
What position did you bat in?
all over, you know. Second, I was a pretty good hit and run guy. I hit probably second in the order more than anything. But some of those years we had good ball clubs, I might have hit as low as 6th, as they would put their second leadoff man, and But I honestly don't remember some of the details. I remember one summer, between my junior and senior, I started playing for them when I was still in college. And my junior year in college, I was a congressional intern with United States Senator Alexander Wiley. And I went to D.C. for a month, and the internship was a month. There were 2 kids from every state got to go. And while I was gone, of course, I didn't play any baseball for 1 month. And I came back and then finished out the season. That summer I played 63 games with this team.
Oh,
Wow.
And I was gone for a month of the summer.
So that's 2 months.
Well,
Wow.
we started now. You start in April at that level. You would start playing, like now, these teams would start playing on the weekends
Yeah.
when the college kids, and we had a couple of kids who were just coming out of high school that would fill out the roster. And so that was a lot of baseball.
Yeah.
boy, oh boy.
Now, you left Portage
Yeah.
and took an assistant's position at the University of Maryland in 1967.
Yeah, grad assistant. I was
Okay.
a physical education grad. What they did,
That's where you got your master's.
PhD.
Oh, your PhD, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
they.
That's what I meant.
What they do at that level, they hire grad students to teach physical education. In those days at University of Maryland, everybody had to take physical education. When you come into the school, you had to take 1 year of physical education. And so to teach that, they would take grad students like myself, and I was one of the teachers, and I would teach, and I don't know how many weeks. You'd have 3 weeks of swimming and 3 weeks of soccer and 3 weeks of basketball and so on to fill out your physical education. So that's how I started. I did that for a year. And for that, I actually made money. They actually paid you as well as gave you free tuition. So
Who was your head coach there?
the guy's name was Bud Milliken. And Bud Milliken was, I'll give you a trivia question now, see if anybody can answer this. Bud Milliken, when he became the head basketball coach at Maryland, came from the state of Iowa
Yep.
as a high school coach. Do you remember that, Murph?
He was a tennis player, wasn't he?
I don't know. But do you know the name of that high school he coached? And a good friend of mine, Carol Luss, C.R. Luss,
I know
from
him.
here in town, played for Coach Milliken
Is that
in
right?
high school
Where at?
at Newton High School.
Really?
Okay.
And he got hired
Wow.
from Newton High School to be the head coach in the Atlantic Coast Conference at the University of Maryland.
Wow.
That's hard to believe,
Wow.
isn't it? I didn't
It
believe
sure
it.
is,
And
yeah.
C.R. Luss was telling me that. He said, Bud Milliken, was that the guy? He said, he was my high school. I said, no way. He said, yeah. He had to bring his yearbooks to show me. I thought he was pulling my leg, And so Bud Milliken was the head coach, and I learned a lot just being there and observing. I volunteered and helped in the program that year and learned an awful lot watching him coach.
And
Good
you were
guy.
there how many years?
Was there, that 1 year, he got fired that year, so I must not have been too big a help to him, but his assistant, in those days, they only had one assistant, and that assistant was the guy I was kind of helping with the freshman team.
Okay.
And he became the head coach,
Is that Frank Fellows?
Frank Fellows, yeah.
Okay.
And he
Now,
was
wasn't
from,
Iowa after a coach from Maryland?
Long time ago, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Don't know.
they could have. It's
Trying to
possible.
think who that was.
Maybe it would have been Bud Milliken because he came through Iowa. He played at Missouri for Hank Iva.
Okay.
Oh, really?
And he had a lot of the Hank Iva man-to-man
Okay.
Midwestern influence, so it's possible if you go back that far. But that was in the 60s. He had already been at Maryland 10 years, so it would have been in the early 50s
Oh, wow.
sometime.
And I'd been in high school then, so.
My dad was a big proponent of Hank Iva's system.
Yeah. Well, Hank Iva, if you look at Bobby Knight and the other coaches that have gotten a reputation on the man-to-man defense and helping and stuff like that, almost all of that goes back to Hank Iva. Whereas he influenced guys on the East Coast as well as the West Coast, and they changed things, but Hank Iva was a real giant in the start of the game.
So you weren't at College Park, Maryland very long.
I was there
Couple years?
3 years.
3 years.
2 years as an assistant, and then Frank Fellows got fired.
Huh.
And so that was my first 2 experiences. And the other assistant coach took a job at American University, Tom Young, his name was, and
In D.C.?
and he asked me if I would come with him and be his assistant at American University. And I was getting some offers in because once you get close to your PhD, these small colleges you're in demand because you have the academic qualifications where you can teach at the small college level as well as do some coaching.
Which was the goal.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but I thought if I don't get that PhD now, I'll never get it. If I take a job, I'd never finish. And we didn't have any children, and my wife had been teaching in high school, and so that enabled us financially to live, a good life, even though I was going to school. So.
Did you ever get married?
Pardon?
Did you ever get married?
I did, yes. I did when I was 22 when I got married.
Oh, is that right?
My wife was just out of college. She was 1 year behind me at college, and so been married a long time.
Is that where you met? Was it Platteville?
Yeah. Yep.
That's great.
Was she a Wisconsin girl too?
Yeah,
Tom?
Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. So, some good memories. But anyway, American University, so we spent 5 years there all together before I got my first head job in college. And D.C., what a terrific place, especially historian.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
There's so much there.
You've never been to Washington?
No.
Oh, it's...
I did, like you, I did an internship there.
Did you?
In D.C., yeah. I worked for a congressman from Minnesota who is still a congressman from Duluth, Jim Oberstar. And
That's an argument for term limits.
yeah, he's a really good guy. He's a really good guy.
So what did you do? What kind of work did you have?
They said, oh, you're from Iowa. Then you deal with all the letters that have anything to do with agriculture.
Oh, really?
And then at that time, summer of '79, we had the energy crisis. So it was long gas lines, and I had to deal with all the letters complaining about gas. So those are my two main jobs.
How old, had you had training then, or were you just out of
I
college?
was a poli-sci major. I was still, I had 1 semester left. I graduated in December of '79. And so I had an aunt who still lives in Potomac, Maryland. And she had invited me out the Christmas before that. And I met the congressman and his wife and kids, and they needed a babysitter. And they asked me if I'd babysit, and I said, well, sure, I'll make some money. And then they offered me the use of his office so I could complete a paper that I was working on for a poli-sci class. And back, before the internet, all you had to do was pick up the phone and ask somebody from the Library of Congress to run this report over or that info sheet. And I got back to Iowa City, and I got a phone call from the congressman's office, and they asked if I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience. And we got a lot of special meet and greets with the president and with
Who was the president?
Jimmy Carter. And so we got to meet him as a group. And we also had special programs.
Murph thought maybe it was FDR.
But that summer I lived out there, I went to College Park quite a few times.
Yeah.
It wasn't very far from Potomac.
No.
And my aunt had a friend there who had a daughter, and she went to school there, and really became quite fond of the College Park area, and of course, chowder.
Yeah, there's so much to do in that area. I mean, we would go on the weekends, not having children, and just do sightseeing. And every weekend there was something exciting that you could go and see or do. And
I worked weekends at the famous Georgetown Tavern called Billy Martin's Tavern. No relation to the baseball player, but waited on all kinds of famous people like Jackie Kennedy and people like that. And,
wow, that's interesting.
It was,
Wow, that's it.
It was a very interesting time, but the internship program was what was so, I think, valuable. Answering all those letters.
yeah.
Again, not by email.
Yeah.
You had to type it. And
My grandson just come back from that. Do you see that? That's where they take the class reunion.
really,
Or the class trip
Yeah.
out of Regina every year now.
Oh, that's nice.
it's special.
How long were they out there? What,
A week.
a week? Huh?
Yeah.
That's long enough.
And he just couldn't believe what he's seen.
Yeah.
They went to the cemetery because
Arlington.
the athletic
Yeah.
director's son was shot down, and he's buried there.
Just recently.
Oh, really?
Just
He
recently.
said, oh,
yeah.
he said,
Just
Grandpa, it was so sad to see all the other people there.
Yeah.
And they
It's
had
a very
history
somber
about it.
place.
Yeah, that's right.
Fort Myer, that's right on the...
Yeah.
Now, you left Maryland and got your first head coaching job in Easton, Pennsylvania. Now I have to ask, did you ever meet Larry Holmes?
You know, I did. I was there. I think Larry was like 18 when I was there. I don't.
He's the Easton Assassin, heavyweight champ.
He actually fought a fight in one of his early fights. The district attorney from there was his first manager that got him going. And they actually had one of his first fights was right in our gym at the
Really?
at Lafayette,
At Lafayette?
College there. Yeah,
Wow.
when he was just getting started. And,
Sure.
I mean, I never knew him, but
You seen him fight?
I don't think I was at the fight, Murph. But he was always around, you know, so it was somebody that you saw. And I had never been much of a boxing fan, never been to a
I
real
remember
fight.
Friday nights. Every Friday night,
Yeah.
we watched
Friday
the
night
fight.
fight.
I remember watching it on TV.
Sure.
Yeah.
We did have TV back when I was a kid.
Now this was 1971 when you took the job at Lafayette in Pennsylvania. And I just want everyone watching to know that your record there at Lafayette was 100, I got to get this right, 119 wins and 44 losses.
Pretty
Not bad for your first head coaching gig.
Yeah.
How many years, Tom?
I was there 6 years.
6 years. And that was the Patriot League.
Yes. Well,
So-
in those days, it was called the East Coast Conference.
Oh, really?
It's the Patriot League now, but in those days, it was an unusual league. It had two divisions. It had Lehigh, Lafayette, Bucknell, Delaware, Ryder, schools like that, and then the other one was St. Joe's, LaSalle, Temple, the larger schools on the other half of the league. And then at the end of the year, you'd get together and play to go to the NCAA tournament. So it was a pretty interesting, because our half of the league was aid based on need, the Ivy League formula. And then the other half, you could give scholarships at LaSalle and Temple
I see.
and St. Joe's.
Now-
American U was in the other half.
You went up against Jim Valvano in that league, didn't
Yep,
you?
Jim Valvano was at Bucknell, was a good friend, and we would work each other's basketball camps in the summer. Jim Valvano was a terrific speaker. I'm sure you've all heard his cancer speech
Sure.
Yeah.
that they play every year, the Jimmy
What did
V
he say?
Foundation.
Don't give up.
Don't
Don't
ever give
ever
up.
give up.
Well, he would come, he'd say, look, he said, I'll come and speak at your camp, you come and speak at my camp up at Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. And so we did that, and when I heard him speak, I said, Jim, I said, this isn't fair. He said, what do you mean? I said, you're really good. I said, you're really a terrific speaker. He's like an entertainer. He'd be up there and
Yeah, I
telling
know.
stories. He'd have props. He'd have a little rat that he'd bring out, and it was his Jim rat, and he did it all. You know, he had the shtick even then that he was young, but
We had we sold a necktie that he promoted.
is that right?
I don't before cancer. I don't know before and after cancer.
What was the brand?
I don't remember.
Wembley?
No.
Well, you were at Lafayette for 6 years, and then you left and went to Boston College.
Mm-hmm.
Took a big step up. You were there for 5 years. Had
Took
a
a
record.
pay cut to take the job.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Why?
I just felt there was a move I had to make if I were going to
Advance.
do something, you know, and Lafayette treated me really well, and we were doing well and everything, but Boston,
Yeah.
Yeah.
College,
Sure.
I could see the potential there, so.
100 wins, 47 losses at Boston in 5 years. And then Stanford comes calling.
Yeah.
Now, you've been on the East Coast for a while at this point, and you're going completely across country to the West Coast, to the Pac-12.
Yeah.
What were your
I
thoughts
might not
then?
have thought that out real well. I don't know. I don't know. I thought it was time to make a move, and we were doing well at Boston College, but there's something about Stanford and the academics
Sure.
and California, and it kind of appealed to me. And the funny thing is, I expressed some interest to the athletic director. The job opened up real early in the year, maybe February. And so I called the athletic director, Andy Geiger was the AD, who ended up at Ohio State.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, I'd be interested. I said, I can't do anything until the season's over. We're having a good year at Boston College. And he said, oh, no, I understand. I'm just glad to know it. And he said, if you don't mind, I'm going to have somebody call you, and we'll try to work out something. And all of a sudden, about a week or two later, I got a call from Bob Knight. And I'd met Bob Knight. When I was at American U, he brought his Army team down, and we scrimmaged at Fort Myers, right next to the cemetery there. And so I'd known him a little bit, but not well. And he said, I hear you might be interested in Stanford. And I said, yeah. I said, I have some interest. He said, well, my job is, I'm supposed to negotiate your contract with Stanford. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, they admitted my son, Tim, to Stanford. And I told the AD, and they worked to get him in, as you had to. It's hard to get in that place. And I said, look, if I can ever do anything for you, you call me. He says, they called me. So he would say, well, how much are you making, and what do you have? Do you have any TV or radio or camp and all the other bells and whistles you have with coaching? And so I told him, and then he'd call back a couple weeks later. He said, well, what about this, and how many years? And he gave me some advice. He said, well, yeah, I think you should think about this and that and the other thing. And by the time I went out there for the interview, that contract was so wired that it had everything that I could possibly want in it. And so it became a no-brainer. We ended up winning a lot of games that year. We went on and won. We beat...
this is at Boston?
Yeah, this is at Boston College. We beat San Francisco, I think, in the first round when they were pretty decent. And then DePaul was number 2 in the country that year. And we beat them in the second round. And then we went to St. Louis for the regionals. We beat Kansas State, who was really good that year.
So you're in the Final Eight at that point.
We played Houston.
Yeah.
And Houston was so good that Elijah came off the bench. And we played on national TV to go to the Final Four, and we lose a heck of a game. Many people thought it was one of the most exciting NCAA tournament games they'd ever seen. And so that was...
What was the score?
As I remember, Murph, it was the 90s. And Houston had more than we did. I remember that pretty well.
Yeah. Mike Drexler was on that team, possibly?
I think so.
Yeah.
Michael Young was on that team. I remember him. He was the kid, Reed Geddes, the white kid who does a lot of TV now, national TV. He was on the team. We had to foul him at the end, and that was a mistake because he never missed any free throws. But I just remember they were a pretty talented ball club.
Well, I hate to say this, guys. We're out of time.
No.
I've got a couple minutes.
Murph's got some more stories.
Oh, yeah. I want to just say a couple things. It was really good to see you back on the floor at Carver Hawkeye Arena earlier this season to celebrate the 25th anniversary of your very first team at Iowa. That team accomplished more than any other team as far in terms of how far you went in the NCAA. But I also think your last team at Iowa was really special, and maybe more special to you. For achieving the Sweet 16 status in the NCAA tournament and overcoming all the doubters and all the haters and anything else that might have been going on at that time. I also want to, just on behalf of all these guys here, say thanks for how you handled the Chris Street death. Not just how you handled it, but how you led your team and the fan base through maybe the worst period in Hawkeye basketball history ever. It's emblazoned in our minds forever. And those wins at Michigan State and then home against Michigan will never be forgotten by Hawkeye fans who were alive and aware at that time. What you've accomplished here as the most winningest coach in Hawkeye basketball history is special, but it goes beyond that, guys. It's the things that Dr. Tom has done outside the arena that make us proud to call you a Hawkeye, make us proud to call you friend, and make us really proud that you came on our show today.
Well, I'm honored to be here.
We're really grateful.
Well, I think everybody that I know, for sure, the way Tom Davis handled everything, he was a class act as the Iowa coach and a representative for the University of Iowa.
You taught us how to accept winning and losing in a gentlemanly way, much like Bump Elliot would have suggested. And we're grateful for that.
Well, I
Dr.
appreciate
Tom.
that.
And you handled the Chris Street situation just tremendous.
That was tough, Murph. It brings a tear to my eye still.
It's been 20 years.
Yeah,
it
was
20
tough.
years.
But I don't know if anyone else
Unbelievable.
could have handled it as well, as dignified, and as successfully, not just for yourself and for the team, but for the fan base throughout the state. That touched the whole country, but it really hit home.
Especially the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guys, we're out of time,
Yep.
and I've got to say goodbye. I got to say thank you to Dr. Tom Davis, the winningest coach in Iowa Hawkeye basketball history. This has been Sports Opinion. You can watch every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on Channel 18, every Sunday night at 6 p.m., and you can also catch it on my Facebook page. But on behalf of Bob and Earl and Bud, I'm Dirk Keller thanking you for watching Sports Opinion. And remember this, either you're a Hawk or you're not. Go Hawks. Thanks, Dr. Tom.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
I need to ask
Amen.
one question.